So once again, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening according to your time zone. I would like to welcome you all for the TORG and King Faisal Hospital Rwanda Foundation collaborative conference. And this time it is a second annual scientific conference in the 10th anniversary for the Operating Global. And we're conducting this conference with the theme of pioneering the future of surgery, safety, innovations, and sustainable healthcare. And we would like to warmly acknowledge and appreciate the Operating Room Global and King Faisal Hospital Rwanda for organizing this milestone event and our supporting partners for this conference, whose collaborations has made uh, this conference possible and comes as spur. And I want to mention IRCAD Africa, the Robotic Global Surgical Society, Justin's House Organization, the G4 Alliance, Black Belt Academy of Surgical Skills, the European College of Aesthetic Medicine and Surgery, Magistrature Game, Kigali Top Events, the CPD Group, Safe Surgery Initiative, Intersurgeon, Safe Surgery Innovation, and the Medical Students Association of Rwanda, and many more partners. Once again, we want to extend our gratitude to our partners supporting organizations, faculties for their invaluable support through this conference. The conference is co-chaired by Dr. Gaston Niringira, who is a senior consultant anesthesiologist and pain specialist at King Faisal Hospital, Rwanda, and he's also a senior lecturer at the University of Rwanda, advisory board member at the Operating Room Global, and chair of the postgraduate medical education at Africa Health Science University. And joining as a co-chair is Dr. Kara Neal. She's an acting deputy vice chancellor for academic affairs and research at Africa Health Science University and chief of education, training and research officer at the King Faisal Hospital, Rwanda. And she brings a strong background in higher education, including her doctorate from the University of Liverpool, leadership at the University of Global Health Equity, and service as a board member of the Project Management Education Foundation. And coming to our today's session, we will be starting with a keynote address from respected Professor David O'Regan on journey of mastery through accessible and sustainable learning. Professor Organ is a distinguished surgeon, educator, and innovator in medical education, and he is the founder and CEO of the Black Belt Academy Surgical Skills, which operates in over 130 countries. And he is also a professor of medical education and research at the Faculty of Medicine, University Malaya and Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. And previously, he has served as a consultant adult cardiac surgeon with Leeds Teaching Hospital Trust in the United Kingdom. Professor Oregon's career spans surgical practice, research, education, with a focus on developing accessible, sustainable, and high-quality learning strategies for healthcare professionals worldwide. And I'm proud to invite Professor Regan over to you.
Thank you very much indeed for the kind introduction. And I would like to take you through the basics of surgical training and a journey through mastery. And allow me to... The QR code will give you my CV and my background, but the 2 degrees that I'm most proud of are my second Dan in Iaido, and I'll continue my study in Iaido at the Japan Center in Kuala Lumpur. I'm also third Dan in karate and got my first part of the fourth Dan 2 years ago. I think mastery is beautifully summed up by Lord Barclay Moynihan, an eminent surgeon who practiced at Leeds General Infirmary, where I was a consultant cardiac surgeon for 20 2 years. This is what he says. There are surgeons who operate upon the canine principle of savage attack, and the biting and tearing of tissues are terrible to witness. These are they who operate with one eye on the clock, and who judge the beauty of any procedure by the fewness of minutes which it is taken to complete. There are other surgeons who believe in the light of hand, who use the utmost gentleness, and who deal lovingly with every tissue that they touch. The scalpel is indeed an instrument of most precious use, and in some hands a royal scepter, but in others a rude mattock. The perfect surgeon must have the heart of a lion, never the claws, and the heart of the sheep. Heart of a lion and, hands of a lady, never the claws of a lion or the heart of the sheep. An operation is done quick enough when it is done right. Every movement should tell, every action should achieve something. And manipulation, if it's required, should not be half done or hesitantly done. It should be done deliberate, firm, intentional, and final. Infinite gentleness, scrupulous care, light handling, and purposeful, effective, quiet movements that are no more than a caress are necessary if an operation is to be the work of an artist and not a hew of flesh. In that, we recognize the attributes of a good operation when we look at it. There's a flow and a rhythm, and we see the lightness of touch. But how do we achieve this? Well, Ericsson is famed for his 10,000 hours, where he described the learning and development of violinists and piano players. This is not innate ability or capacity. It's simply practice, supervised practice from an early age and maintained at high daily levels. It is purposeful and can circumvent the limits of working memory and sequential processing. Do note the posture of the little boy in this picture and the black and white keys. You see, in martial arts, the most advanced thing you can do are the basics consistently. And even though I am third dan, we still practice the very foundations of technique, because technique comes before power and speed. And a solid foundation has many important implications, notwithstanding safer and more effective surgery. It reduces costs and complications. So where is this technique described? Well, the original OSAT paper by Richard Resnick in 1997 did have a 22-point binary checklist mentioning some of the basic techniques. But my recent systematic survey of the literature concludes that this has been forgotten. Let's take you back a bit further. We all learned to drive, and some of you might recognize the pedals in the car. There's only one pedal which you can slam your foot on. The other two pedals require a degree of feel, because if you're not feeling, the car will either speed off or judder to a halt. So how do we teach this in surgery? Please take a look at this picture and contemplate and even put in the chat what you see. This is one of 102 similar photographs taken from skills training around the globe. Any ideas? Could somebody put something in the chat? Well, they're sitting down. 2, they are working on silastic models, plastic models. And if you look closely, the handling of the needle holder and the forceps is not correct. Silastic suture pads have become ubiquitous in training in many basic suture skill sets, but we've put the pad and low fidelity models through a CT scanner, and you can see that the suture pad is off to the right and has no relevance to soft tissues or vascular tissues. The point is, you need proper models. And if you're wanting to use bone, I suggest you use bamboo. So, right, let's stand up and use a real model as in this photograph. But what do you see here? What you're looking at? Well, yes, they're all standing up, but note the posture and hunching over the table. And you might realize that you stand at the end of the table fatigued at the end of the day because you've got 17 muscles that support the scapula that move it out to the side. And just hold your arms up like this for a moment. Very quickly, you feel the fatigue. And that explains why you are tired at the end of the day, but also why 92% of surgeons end up with musculoskeletal problems. But there is something more profound in this picture. You might not be a cardiac surgeon, but you know the heart is inside the box, not on top of the box. So fundamentally, this makes me smile because as a cardiac surgeon, this you don't see unless you're doing a transplant, and is not how most people operate. So that is why with the Black Belt Academy, we have introduced an ironing board and a banana. You wouldn't iron up here, and you wouldn't iron down there. You naturally set it at the functional level of comfort. That's why countertops are the same height they are. And the banana, as you'll see, is an effective, cheap model that gives you instant feedback. And if you're feeling a little tired at the end of the day, you can indeed eat the banana. Lord Barclay Moynihan thought his hands were the handsome servants of his brain, and indeed cast his hands in bronze. But to understand the instrument, you need to understand, like that little boy playing the violin, how to hold them. You must not grip. There's more sensory input from the tips of your fingers to the brain than there is from the eye to the brain. So the simple principle of holding an instrument is maximize the surface area of the pulp of your fingers with the instrument. I want you for the moment now to pinch yourself. Yep, do this and pinch yourself. It's sore, isn't it? Very sore. Very uncomfortable. Because in doing that, you're generating for ladies 25 newtons of force and gentlemen 35 newtons of force. And if you take the surface area of an instrument as 5 millimeters squared, you are generating 5 million Newton meters squared by pinching. This is a banana. It's giving you feedback. You pinch a banana, you will see that. And poor use of the forceps will cause mucosal damage and endothelial cell genocide. That's for the head. This is 790 times your car tire pressure. And what we don't teach is how to hold. Now pinch your arm, but keep the fingers distended. And you can't pinch hard enough. This grip of flexor digitorum profundus and flexor pollicis longus is the grip that Tom Cruise uses to hang off helicopters in Mission Impossible. No place in theater for this. We want to use this. You see that? That is the most complex grip of any humanid and differentiates you from the apes. That is what we need in surgery. And that lightness of touch in a black belt scale is take a piece of pasta and can you tie a reef knot in it without breaking the pasta? So let's break down some of these basic skills. You might have watched the Chinese Olympics and recognized that the divers who scored 10 entered the water without any splash. Why? Because they entered the water at 90 degrees. 90 degrees, you recognize, is the angle you need to sew on a button because it goes between the warp and weft of the material. But that's the same with tissue. But it also applies to surgery because this paper on dissections The author said if you don't take your needle through cleanly at 90 degrees and perfectly rotate, you get bleeding. And in corneal surgery, if you don't do it properly, then you end up with misty vision. So very simply, we need to consider taking the needle around in a circle such that the thread sits through the hole made by the needle. And if you actually drag the needle in and out, you get a gap. And that's your bleed and microaxis. So my splash models for beginners are the potato. Can you rotate your needle through the potato and out without tearing? The principle is very simple. 90 degrees is the perfect angle. It's the fourth part of the circle. And in every orthogonal plane, it's equal and opposite. So this is easy because having done a study looking at your ability to pick out 90 degrees, I know 92% of you would reliably pick out 92 degrees in a series of slides between 86 and 94 degrees. So simple stitching is 90 degrees to the tissue, 90 degrees across the tissue, and 90 degrees into the tissue. Now, all you need to do is rotate the needle and get yourself into the body position that makes it most comfortable. But we need a model that actually shows you when you're doing this correctly or not. But then to deconstruct it further, this can't happen by just picking up the needle without looking at the way it is mounted. And very simply, it needs to be at the tip, just beyond the halfway and angled out, because mathematics comes into that as well. Because when the wrist is displaced from the elbow when you're operating, so your needle has to come out. Now, the perfect rotation actually happens when you think about it, of pronation and supination. That's 180 degrees. And that was the radius folding over the ulna, because at the head of the radius, you know, there's a round top within the ligament to enable to that rotation. And when you're holding a needle holder, hold it like a screwdriver, and you get the perfect rotation. Doing that is not rotation, that's circumduction. That, you recognize, if you're using a screwdriver, can work in any and every position. So hold your instrument properly. This is where the banana becomes useful. Which surgeon would you like to operate on you? The one on the right or the one on the left? It's pretty clear. As one of our trainees said, this is the most fun yet absolutely punishing model that I've ever used, because you can instantly see where it is working and not working, because the phenol oxidases in the banana skin turn black. This is a simple exercise, 12 perfectly radial sutures from inside out, as if you're going round the clock. We've actually scored this. 5 raters, 3 experts, 2 medical students on 94 bananas, and have an interclass correlation of 0.97. We've tried this, going back to the basics, how you stand, how you hold the instrument, and on low fidelity models of the banana and potato, over a period of 6 months, this cohort of trainees significantly improved their skill. Not only that, my master's student has gone from 25% to 65% over 6 weeks instruction. And more importantly, he has been noted in theatre to be more effective, more efficient, and he said he no longer feels fatigued. So it's not about stitch, 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 stitch. It's about set up, stitch, because the time it takes you and me to put a needle through the tissue is the same, systole. The time it takes me to do the next stitch is significantly shorter, because I'm practiced and rehearsed on the setup. So I say this is diastolic learning, and this is where surgical skills can be learned on low fidelity models, particularly stitching. Set up, stitch, set up, stitch, set up, stitch, and very quickly the setup becomes automatic. So let's focus quickly on the other skills like knot tying. Knot tying is a result of taking a length and the physical action of putting one over the other. Okay. So how do you actually catch that short end and take it away? And how do you practice it? And do you understand what a correct knot is? I put it to you, you do, because you tie your shoelaces. The shoe on the left-hand side is correctly tied because the loop is across the shoe, indicating that it's a reef knot, and reef knots self-tie. On the right, the bow is down the shoe, and what happens as you walk and flex, it comes undone because an uncrossed knot loosens. So our black belt skill is, can you take a piece of cotton, tie it to a pencil, put through a cup that is held to a plate such that you do not crush the cup, lift it off the plate, but secure a knot on a pencil where you can take a forceps and move it along and it doesn't move. That is a secure knot. But if you want to know if it's watertight, blood-tight, even airtight, start tying off balloons with cotton without breaking the cotton and without the balloon going down. Now we're starting to get secure knots. But what's interesting about the cup is that it amplifies the sound of the thread running down itself. And you should not hear any sound at all, because if you do, that is the thread rasping against each other, potentially weakening the knot. What about scissors? And how do you develop tissue plates? Well, organic tissues, like this tangerine orange, have got natural tissue plates. Take the skin off, separate out a segment, and then cut the skin off the segment to expose the flesh. But do not spill any juice, because that gives you immediate feedback. What this is teaching you is lightness of touch and accuracy of dissection. Note all the palps of my fingers applied to the instruments at all times, giving me maximum feel. Because the instrument should be considered an extension of your fingers. And only with lightness of touch can you hold the tissues. Organic material. But what about the scalpel? How do you learn to feel to cut? Try taking a scalpel through an orange and then squeezing the orange at the end to see if there's any juice out. Feel your way through the orange. And this was beautifully highlighted on Monday on our Black Belt Academy session by Prof. Seeley, who's an obstetrician. She said with the cesarean section, you have to get through the uterus very quickly, but don't cut the baby's face. Think about it. You have to feel your way through the tissues. Recognize when you're at the last layer, because if you puncture that, you could probably cut the baby's face. Practicing with organic material, and I've actually used layers of sandwich meat and cut through one layer at a time so you feel the tissue, and it just requires the weight of the forearm. These are essential basic skills that you can practice on low fidelity models anywhere and everywhere, as I've been teaching them, from outside to inside, hotel room, out on the ocean, and a 51st floor flat, as well as a tent. You don't need much at all, not at all. All you need is a set of instruments and not cheap instruments. This is what we're using in the Black Belt Academy in Malaysia. Students actually say, how much is that? Well, that's 270 ringgit. They say, oh, that's expensive. Then you ask them, what sport do you play? Badminton was reply. How much did you pay for your racket? 600 ringgit. The other person said they paid 800 ringgit for a skateboard. So if you want to invest in your training, you need a good set of instruments. You need to set yourself up properly, stand properly, ensure that you maintain your posture, the functional anatomy of the upper limb, the feel of the instruments, and do practice on any organic material that you want. Because mastery is a journey and it requires correctness of technique. This means patience, perseverance, and effort over skill. I've put in the chat box our link to the Black Belt Academy of Surgical Skills. It is free. It carries CPD points for all aspiring surgeons. And I look forward to seeing you when we live every Monday evening, and joined by two of our sensei to talk through the nuances and how to learn skills. Thank you very much indeed for your kind attention. I am very happy to take questions or comments from anybody and invite you to participate. I hope I'm demonstrating that this is simple and effective, and the models are giving you immediate feedback. When I tried this with some surgeons, they stood back from that banana, and this training cardiac surgeon said, I'm going to have to focus on my basics. And that's what it's all about. Low fidelity, sustained practice, any place, anywhere. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor, for your well demonstrated presentation. And yeah, I have been screening through the QR code and also your CV, and it is pretty huge accomplishment, like a cardiac surgeon demonstrating lifelong education or surgical education, and being also a karateist, martial artist. Yeah, when I say it, like as one of in the early encounters, we have been trying to be like in that kind of scenario, trying training in martial arts. But well, I'm failed before reaching the black belt. Here you are with a third dan. So it was a privilege having you here. So we're going to move to the Q&A, and I will read one of the questions in the chat box, and other things, welcome to put your questions in the chat box. So one of the questions stated that thing. Yeah, I think I'm missing. I've seen it. Okay. So until I explore this question, I want to forward mine. So specifically, surgeons burnout might be more related with ergonomics. So in your work on ergonomics, what are the most overlooked factors that compromise surgeon performance and patient safety, and how can sustainable learning models address them?
The ergonomics is evidenced by the fact that 92% of surgeons will have severe musculoskeletal degeneration over the course of their lifetime. We are not teaching people to stand at the operating table properly. And I recall when training, asking my senior trainer to come in and help me. And what he did was change the light, change the position of the table, and in those days, expand the incision a little bit, and it suddenly became easy. It is important to stand properly. And remember that as soon as your elbows leave the side, you're using 17 muscles per scapula to hold it in that position. And when you're watching surgeons operate, during the course of a long operation, it's quite amazing the contortions people get into. And this comes down to understanding how you stand and how you use your limbs. What's interesting, this has been taught in a grade style in martial arts for 600 years. The Royal College of Surgeons of Edinburgh has been open for 525 years, and we're not teaching surgery in the same way. So in the Black Belt Academy, our syllabus takes you from red belt to black belt through iterative stages that you've got to demonstrate each of these skills before you go on to the next stage. And the results, as we showed you, was a difference of that in the box whisker plots in stitching skills. But it's having models that give you feedback that's important.
Thank you, Prof. So on the chat box, Chance wants to know, he would like to ask you to compare between left-handed and right-handed surgeons doing surgery.
Right. Now, this is a very good question. 7% of the population are left-handed. So there are two problems with the design of instruments at the moment. They're mostly right-handed. They're also being designed by males who've got big hands. So with the increased number of women coming into surgery, people are finding the instruments are not as ergonomic, accepted. Companies like B. Braun are addressing that. You can imagine from an economic point of view to have 3 sets of instruments, one you're using, one spare, one in the sterilization unit. For 7% of the population, most hospitals would not do that. And this is the last ism of surgery. What I suggest to you is start these models using your right hand, and you'll find that you very quickly can learn with your right hand. In the end, you'll have a left hand that's better than most of the other surgeons, but your right hand will be as good. So the secretary of the Royal College of Surgeons of Edinburgh is a left-handed pediatric orthopedic surgeon. And during his training, he learned to operate with his right hand. I had a trainee who was left-handed and operated with me for 18 months. And certainly for fine instruments, left-handed is appropriate. And you can get fine instruments for a particular task. But to help him, I learned to operate left-handed. And on one occasion, I was doing a bottom end. And I said to my trainee who was standing opposite, "Did you notice anything?" And they said, "No." Well, actually, halfway through the anastomosis, I used my left hand to complete the anastomosis. He hadn't noticed. And actually having a functional left hand and right hand gives you a new dimension in ergonomics at the table.
Thank you very much. So maybe if there is no other more question, my last question would be to know, as both cardiac surgeon and a certain black belt karate, how has your martial arts training shaped your approach to mastery and continuous learning in surgery? I think both the attendants and me myself, we were wondering that these both things are just very intensive ones. They need uh, a great deal of focus, and I think few can master both of these things, being cardiac surgeon and karate. Black belt karate is sort of very rare finding, and I haven't heard of like these scenarios. Maybe I'm short of information,
So
but how
from my point of view, as I train on Sundays now with the sword, it is useful to be a student. You're continuing to learn and learning new skills. And that's exactly it. Mastery is a journey, it's not a destination. So me learning the skills and understanding what the sensei is telling me. For example, from the end of the dojo, with my sword, I'd done a horizontal cut. In that position, my opponent could kill me with the sword back. But if I just move it 2 centimeters, and now it's in the camera, you cannot. And he could spot this from the end of the room. You do not need any force. You just need to feel and understand the instruments correctly. And what martial arts has given me is an opportunity to really deconstruct the very basics and fundamentals of our skills and build them from red belt all the way to black belt. This is not linear. It gets harder and harder, as it does with martial arts. But intrinsic to this, you bow onto the mat, you bow to the sensei. The sensei is no better or worse than you. It's just somebody who's been long on the road and has more experience. And that's what I consider my role is when teaching surgery. The respect is important. The relationship is important, but also surgery is not just a motor skill. As part of what we're trying to emphasize in the Black Belt Academy, it does require the right mindset. And in martial arts, mindset is extremely important. What's interesting that I'm taught how to use a katana, and to improve my field, I took off my wedding band. Actually, the sensei said, you take off your wedding band because as you focus on the art, you don't want any outside distraction. What is teaching you is that Zanshin, Mushin, and Fushin that are described in the way of the martial artists. And I think they aptly apply to the way of the surgeon, their behavior and their mindset as they walk into theater.
Thank you very much, Professor. It was an honor having you here at our conference, and I hope attendees has got a deal of experience in find this presentation very useful and purposeful. And as Professor Organ told us and informed us, we can be like part of the Black Belt Academy and more serious at free and also elevate our academic skills and surgical skills. Thank you once again, and it was an honor. Thank you, Prof.
It's a pleasure. It is important that you're seen to be practicing regularly, and that's why we invite people to a face-to-face meeting so you can have your technique corrected before you get any bad habits. And if there's anybody like yourself or anybody else watching who's interested in continuing this, I'll be delighted to reach out and work with any surgeon to establish this locally.
Thank you very much. So